Challenging China's call for unification, Taiwan reaffirms its commitment to democracy. It wasn't the result Beijing wanted, so will it upset the status quo? With the DPP clinching a third term, Taiwan makes it clear it will not rejoin the mainland, but is its full autonomy sustainable? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Taiwan. Well, many view Taiwan as a potentially massive geopolitical flashpoint. Its internationally unrecognized status as its own country conflicts glaringly with Beijing's One China reunification policy. Still, its precarious situation as a de facto democracy has been maintained for decades, even while China refuses to engage with Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party. On Sunday, the DPP, led by Lin Ching-yi, secured a third term in office, leading many to speculate on how China will respond. We'll debate that in a minute, but first, a look at this weekend's election in Taiwan.
Taiwan's general election ended with a decisive, unprecedented third consecutive victory for the pro-independence Democratic Progressive Party. Its new president, William Lin Ching-yi, is a China skeptic who insists there's no need to declare Taiwan independent, since in his view, it already is. The doctor-turned-politician has been described by Beijing as a dangerous separatist and has been banned from travelling to mainland China and Hong Kong. The win has resonated with the Taiwanese populace and sent a clear message of defiance.
Very proud. We choose our own president in Taiwan. We are country. We are country. We are the light of the world. We love freedom. We love democracy. We supposed to choose our new president.
Global leaders, including from the US, have congratulated Lai, praising the high turnout and democratic process.
We are thankful for the United States' long-term support of Taiwan. I believe our relationship will advance in a stable direction through our continuous hard work and become an important force to safeguard the peace and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific.
China, however, is urging the global community to stay out of its internal affairs, the Foreign Ministry condemning the US Secretary of State for celebrating Lai's win.
No matter what the election results are, it cannot change the basic fact that there is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is part of China. Nor can it change the general consensus of the international community to adhere to the One China principle.
Taiwan's strategic location and economic importance have established it as a core topic in the escalating rivalry between the two powers, particularly in the context of the South China Sea and broader Indo-Pacific dynamics.
There are many problems, but I believe that as long as there is a government willing to have dialogue and willing to listen, it will lead us having new allies around the world.
Taiwan's journey post-election is more than just a regional affair. It's a global narrative unfolding.
So will Taiwan's new leadership threaten the status quo? Well, joining me now to debate that are from Taipei, Lin Ching-yi. She is a legislator with the Democratic Progressive Party and a former spokesperson for outgoing President Tsai Ing-wen. From Beijing is Qinduo, a fellow at the Pangoal Institution and former China Radio International chief correspondent. And from London is Duncan Bartlett, a research associate at the SOAS China Institute. Thanks all so much for being with me. Let me begin in Taipei. And Lin Ching-yi, the DPP has declared a clear win, but some have been quick to point out that, the glass is actually half empty, because almost 60% of the voters did not support the DPP and actually wanted change. So how much are you celebrating today, and how sensitive will your leaders have to be to that majority going forward now?
Actually, we are not really celebrate about that, because we really lost some supporter, especially young generation. And at the same time, we lost our majority in parliament. So I think our new government are still facing very huge challenge in next 4 years.
Tell me why you think you lost some of that, especially the youth support.
I think, of course, for young generations, the leading positions and the leading parties actually, they were not satisfying about that. So they're arguing about the housing problems, arguing about the income problems, but also we still have some social media problems. It means we have some talk show, YouTuber, and TikTok. Actually, we find a lot of the complaint, especially from young generations in TikTok. So that make our young generations lose the connection with our party. This is why we lost at least over maybe 2 million supporters from younger generations. That is, I think our party needs to facing that very big problems because in 2020, the Taiwan she win the 8 million support from especially from young generations. But this time only we have about 5 billion. So that is really means we lost a lot of supporters. And this is what supporters actually they vote for the TPP, the Kewenje. That is his party actually more attractively for young generations.
Okay. Let me ask Qinduo, if you have a similar analysis as to why the DPP didn't get the majority. It won, yes, but as you can hear, they aren't exactly celebrating today because support was lost, and particularly among the youth. Do you think it's, in part because they weren't necessarily social media savvy as they could have been, or are there other issues at stake there?
That's a good question, Andrea. I think, of course, Beijing noticed the dropping of support, especially from the young generation to DPP, the ruling party in Taiwan. At the same time, you do see it's a bit more or less like expected success of the KMT, the largest opposition party in the Yuan legislative Yuan in this this is their parliament over there. So that is a bit of surprise. And also, if you look at the contested issues, we from the mainland tend to see, the young people or the voters care more about this really internal issues. For example, the housing prices, which are too high. That's a complaint from a young generation. And also about so the low salaries, about jobs, etc. It's really about the the cost of living. It's about the daily life. It's about the governance. So we tend to see that as mostly from, it's really something really related to your daily lives.
It's internal. Okay, let me turn to Duncan then, because Duncan, you know very well from the outside, we see this election through the lens of China-Taiwan relationships and the larger global dynamics here. So regardless of support lost or how much was won, William Lai, as he's also known, will be president, and he was seen as a bit of a firebrand in some media outlets because he is, some would even say, just pro-separatist, period, pro-independence. So how antagonistic do you think the relationship between Beijing and the DPP, especially William Lai, will be going forward? And does it run the risk of potentially dangerous escalation?
Well, the rhetoric coming from Beijing ahead of the election was very negative about William Lai. It called him a hoodlum, a separatist, a troublemaker, and it made it very clear that in Beijing's view, it wanted to see the KMT, the more pro-China group, gain ground during this election. Actually, as you rightly say, that means that the KMT has now got the edge in terms of the parliamentary majority. But, the KMT's policy is not for unification with China. It's talking about a recalibration of the relationship. And actually, William Lai said to the other candidates at one point during the election campaign, as far as the People's Republic of China is concerned, we're all pro-independence. And what he means by that is that none of the candidates in the election were suggesting that it's time for Taipei to unify its political system with that of the People's Republic of China. They've never been ruled by mainland China, and they have no intention of being controlled by Beijing at this stage.
Okay, let me come back to Lin Ching-yi. I mean, tell me if you think President Lai will, in a sense, tone down his anti-Beijing rhetoric now. Would you want him to do so? Would that serve the cause of peace better for everybody?
I must to point out we are not anti-China, anti-Beijing. We're looking forward to have better communication with China. But in past decades, of course, we need to know China still keep their threat to Taiwan. For example, they still have some Air Force threat to us, and limit our international participations. So I think the President Lai Ching-te, he mentioned he will follow the President Tsai Ing-wen policies to keep the stable and keep our the situation Taiwan and China. And I think China always asks us to accept one country, two systems. I think one country, two system actually is not be accepted in Taiwan. So I will not say President Lai will increase our dangerous between Taiwan and China. We are still looking forward to have more real and more equal communication status in the future.
Okay, and let me just ask you quickly then, Lin Ching-yi, or how much do you think Hong Kong was on the minds of voters in this election? I mean, if at all. But knowing that so many, thousands rather, I should say, Hong Kongers have actually gone over to Taiwan, especially since the national security law was instituted there, in search of democracy. Do you think this was an issue for voters when they went to the polls?
China issue actually really affect our election in 2020. Because most of Taiwanese, especially young generations, they support the democracy of China, of Hong Kong. But this time, because this thing actually, after 4 years, Hong Kong actually is really controlled by China. So I think in Taiwan, most of the Taiwanese actually, in our viewpoint, we will never accept Taiwan become next Hong Kong. But we also feel very sorry Hong Kong, now they have not their real democracy.
Okay, Qinduo, what do you make of that then? Because, you know, if Taiwan is simply asking for a more equal relationship, they won't necessarily push for independence. Do you think China will go forward with that peacefully, with the status quo as it stands, and maybe tone down their own rhetoric, you know, not calling him so much of a dangerous separatist as they had about who was now president? Go ahead.
Yes, well, the mainland call, you know, some of the officials call Mr. Lai as a separatist, etc., as a troublemaker. I think it really refers to if he pursues the Taiwan independence. You know, we all know what he said at least in the past. He's a practical Taiwan independence worker. So by nature, he will be working, or he has been working, and he will be working for Taiwan independence. In that sense, you know, if there's a Taiwan independence, obviously that will be big trouble for China, for Taiwan, and for the United States. Remember, that's why President Biden reiterates the U.S. policy. Washington does not support Taiwan independence. I think that's really clear. So, in order to, present himself as a, let's say, as a leader that will be more acceptable to Washington and also to the voters in Taiwan, he moderated his voices, his rhetoric. I mean, that's also true. That's a fact. The thing is, like you mentioned, an interesting point. That is, you know, what about equal political entity? You know, the mainland and Taiwan. If Taiwan does not pursue independence. That's exactly the case, you know, basically largely the meaning of 1992 consensus, you know, and the KMT government. That is, there's only one China. Basically, it's up to interpretation, different interpretation. the Taipei government would say, yes, there's only one China. We represent China. China includes both Taiwan and the mainland. The mainland side would say, Beijing represents the China, which also includes Taiwan and the mainland. If you look at the constitution in Taiwan, official name of Taiwan is the Republic of China. So that includes territories, the mainland and Taiwan. So there's overlapping claims. And that situation, the relationship across the streets was really, really good. You see a lot of increasing exchanges and trade and investment between the two sides. So I think that's, at least acceptable to the mainland before, let's say, they talk about national reunification in whatever ways.
Okay. So, Duncan, is the 1992 consensus, is it good enough? Because there are those who feel it is just a matter of time, and potentially even a short time, before China just invades Taiwan, because if not, it looks weak, and that it's not serious about its word on the one China policy. And they believe the U.S. military, for example, is overstretched, that Taiwan is small. What do you see in the future, and would there be an opportunity for Beijing to make a move, or is China possibly also just dealing with too many problems at home of its own right now?
Well, the Office of Taiwan Affairs in Beijing spoke again at the weekend about the glorious unification of Taiwan with the motherland. So that's the rhetoric that's still coming. Xi Jinping himself has said that Taiwan should be unified with the rest of China, peacefully if possible, but by force if necessary. And we've seen persistent military pressure on Taiwan over the past few months, particularly actually in the run-up to the election. Now, the rhetoric coming from Taipei is more conciliatory. William Lai has not used the word independence. He hasn't talked about separating Taiwan from the rest of China. In fact, he's saying that he wants to see dialogue and engagement with China. And again, look at the rhetoric coming from the United States. Yes, it congratulated Mr. Lai, but it also said that the United States will continue to respect the one China policy, as it were, the one China approach that America has had for a long time. So nobody's trying to stir up trouble here. So I would expect that there will be a peaceful situation. The other thing is that China is stretched at the moment. The Chinese defense minister was sacked by Xi Jinping in the middle of last year, and Xi Jinping purged 8 senior generals from the People's Liberation Army just before Christmas. So China is not really in a very strong position militarily to take on an extraordinarily ambitious and dangerous activity such as the invasion of the sovereign state of Taiwan.
Qinduo, I'll come back to you because I saw your eyebrows go up at one point. What surprised you there?
The thing is, like, there's always this kind of a misunderstanding in the West, including Mr. Duncan. This is simply wrong. Taiwan is not a sovereign here. I mean, if we look at the UK's foreign policy, they respect the one China policy. This one China principle that ensures peace and stability across this streets relationship in this region, and also ensures basically stable relationship between China and the United States. The U.S. understands clearly, if the U.S. goes ahead with supporting Taiwan independence, and China will be forced to resort to war, military means to solve this problem. So if we are smart enough, let's die down our rhetoric and talk to each other. But there are also conditions. We are talking about this, as nations, even as between different political entities, even maybe, who knows, in the future on equal terms. But still, it's inside one country. That's the fundamental principle. If you break this principle, and nothing could be talked about, I don't think there will be a good outcome. And also, Mr. Duncan earlier mentioned about Taiwan has never been ruled by the mainland. I'm not sure what he meant. If you look at the history of Taiwan, except for 50 years of colonization by Japan, it's part of China. I mean, that's a reality. The foreign minister of China talked tough on that. He said, that Taiwan will never be independent. You may dislike that, but that's probably true. Unfortunately, we are talking about the hard politics of international relations, of geopolitics. I mean, that's it. So, in what way, one country, two systems, Taiwan will enjoy whatever it has right now? I think for the Chinese side, they can talk to each other. It's really about how to solve this problem.
Yeah, Xingyi, it confuses people terribly outside Taiwan and China that you do hear the one side that just simply says Taiwan is part of China, but then Taiwan considers itself a fully autonomous de facto democracy that has its own laws, its own passports, its own laws that completely conflict with policy in Beijing. So how is it, that's what people I think are confused with, how is that really sustainable?
So I must point out, just like you mentioned, that Taiwan, we have our democratic systems, we have our president elections, our parliament, and we have our countries and the system. So I don't think I think we need to say Taiwan actually we have a different political identity with China. At the same time, of course, I commit that our former national name is Republic of China. That's because of the Chiang Kai-shek. But I must say most of the Taiwanese now, we will agree our real name is Taiwan. We believe, in my viewpoint, I believe one China, but we still have another, is one Taiwan. In our inside problems is we need to have to build our real name in the future. But for Taiwanese people, especially I always want to mention our younger generations, in their mind, we are an independent country, different system with China. But also, you mentioned about the 1992 consensus. Actually, that only belonging to KMT. But also, KMT's consensus is different with CPP. So I think in Taiwan, at least now our government and our major the people's mind, actually, we hope we could to have a normal communication and with China and respect to each other. And the respect to each other based on we need to have very equal position between Taiwan and China.
Okay. Duncan, does it all make sense to you going forward then? I mean, we have to remember as well that this is a country that considers itself a country, or a state that considers itself basically an independent country, but is virtually unrecognized on the international stage. In fact, it just lost another recognition just today, a small island of Nauru in the South Pacific, but still, there are very few that will even see Taiwan diplomatically. So, I mean, how does this continue in the long term?
Well, China has been putting pressure on other countries not to recognize Taiwan formally, diplomatically. On the other hand, liberal democracies around the world have been impressed by what they've seen in Taiwan. They've just witnessed a lively political debate ahead of an election where there's been a distinct choice of candidates. There's been open media coverage. The world's press have been there watching very closely what's been going on. Contrast that situation with China. There are no elections there. The position of the Chinese Communist Party is that there is one country, one party, one leader, and that leader is Xi Jinping. Yes, he's the leader of the People's Republic of China. He also has a clear ambition to be the leader of Taiwan. And whatever you can say about the outcome of the election and the different support for the different parties, it's clear that the people of Taiwan have no intention of asking Xi Jinping to be the leader of their island.
Okay, Qinduo, where does that final question then, just last minute and a half, where do you see this? And I'll ask again, specifically in the long term now.
In the long term, for China, there is, let's say, there's no timetable in terms of when there will be a national reunification. But there is a pathway forward that is really about increase the people-to-people exchange across the street, to increase trade, to increase investment. Because we speak the same language, we are of the same, basically, ethnicity, of the same culture. And earlier, when you guys talked about their name of Taiwan, official name, of course, Republic of China. There's no official name as Taiwan as this political entity. I mean, that's international recognition. Taiwan is part of China. only 12 countries in the entire world recognize Taiwan as an independent country. Duncan talked about Taiwan like it's another country. You ask the UK government, do they recognize Taiwan as an independent country? No. How about Turkey? No. About the US? No. Taiwan is part of China. That's a reality. That's a domestic issue of Chinese people. How to solve this problem? It's really not an issue of the UK or the US or the West.
But they admit it's a very ambiguous kind of definition. Lin Ching-yi, final 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay. If you talk about the same language, how could you say UK and US are the same country? I don't think a language is the reason. But I want to say Taiwan is totally different with China. We are a migrant country. We have a different culture. We have a mixed culture and people in Taiwan.
Okay. That will have to be the
Taiwan
final.
is a leftover issue of the civil war of the Chinese from 1945 to 1949. If you read history, that's a leftover issue.
Things
that's
have
to
changed
be resolved.
a lot, though, since then. I mean, it's not the same Taiwan as it was.
If you read history, I want to say
history matters.
History matters. So you need to need to look at actually in very long history, Taiwan actually been colonized by many different countries, but we never really belonging to China.
Okay, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers this time. I'd really like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us. Our viewers, of course, for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on X, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.